Hello, student. Welcome to the studio. We're going to be starting with cylinders today. Cylinders are the building block for everything we're going to work on in this class. So it's important to practice working on your cylinders. For the first 3 weeks of class, we will be only making cylinders and we're just going to be practicing and we're not going to be saving anything. So it's all about the process. Okay, so when we're centering, the first thing we got to do is we got to get the wheel moving. Your wheel should be spinning counterclockwise. You put your pedal on your left foot. It doesn't matter if you're right or left-handed. The wheel should be spinning counterclockwise. So centering, hands wet, clay wet. Push hard with the heel of your left hand. Centering is all left hand. So you use mainly your left hand until you see it getting taller, and then you bring your right hand in and push the clay back down. Okay, how do you know if it's centered? It's just like being in love, you just know. So if you have to ask, I will say it is not centered. Okay, so close your eyes, feel that clay, and if your hands aren't wobbling, it's centered. So just to illustrate what it's not, if your hands are moving around like this, it is not centered. So check your centeredness by using your finger to hold on the outside of the lump of clay. And if it's hitting just in one spot, then you know that it is not centered. So do not start working until your piece is completely centered. And you know that it's centered because your finger will hit continually all the way around the piece of clay. Okay? Just to reiterate, left hand pushes in using the heel of your hand, and you know you're pressing hard enough when the clay starts getting taller. And then you bring your right hand in. Okay. Once it's centered, we're going to move on to the next step, which is we're opening. So our thumbs are like this, and we're going to press down. It's important to note that we're not lifting our elbows and inserting our thumbs. We are lowering our hands. So 1, 2, 3, go. Not dilly-dally for this step. This creates a lot of friction. The longer you take with this, the more friction it creates and the more likely it is to knock it off center. So this is setting the depth. Now we're going to set the width and flatten the bottom. So my left hand is like this, my right hand is like this, and I'm pressing down to compress the clay. This is compressing the base and setting the diameter of the cylinder. For this piece, I'm using 2 pounds of clay. I would recommend using anywhere between 2 and 3 pounds of clay, depending on the size of your hands. And think about the size of an orange. Okay, if you have smaller hands, maybe like a tangerine. If you have large hands, maybe the size of a grapefruit. Okay, so we're compressing the base of our piece and flattening the bottom. Get the water out of the inside just to illustrate the diameter of my piece. I'm going to draw a line here. I don't usually do this, but just to illustrate my target is that's the diameter of the inside of my piece. If you really want to be fancy, you can use your wooden rib and compress this and flatten it, make it nice and pretty. These pots are like people. It's on the inside that counts, right? So lots of water, push in and up. Again, not a dilly-dally step. This creates a lot of friction. This brings the clay in like this, which creates a right angle at the bottom. It's easier to maintain a right angle than it is to try to push hard later. So you open wide, set the diameter, then push the clay in and up. Now we're going to start pulling. Okay, this is important. Imagine that the wheel is a clock. I'm working right here at 4 o'clock. Okay, my left hand is always on the inside, my right hand is always on the outside because the clay should be going away from me. So left hand on the inside, right hand on the outside, and I'm pushing in and up. The speed of the wheel should be a moderate speed. You shouldn't be going really fast and you shouldn't be creeping. The speed should be proportionate to the speed of your hands. So if you take note, I'm going to dig in a little bit just to illustrate what are throw lines. Those are called throw lines, and they should be parallel. They should not be a spiral. Okay, if it looks like a spiral, like that, your hands are moving too fast. That's the most common problem, is students move their hands too quickly. So think nice and slow, count to 10. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005, and keep going, nice and slow, until you reach the rim, and then follow through. Notice my throw lines are all parallel. How do you hold your hand on the outside? That's a subjective thing. A lot of people hold it differently. I'll show you a couple different ways here. So you could hold your sponge like this and press with the end of the sponge. And then do your pull. You could use your knuckle. So you take your index finger, bend it around like this, around your thumb. Lots of water, always lots of water. Left hand goes inside. Notice that my hands are still at 4 o'clock. They're not creeping around to 3 or 2. Keeping them at 4. Nice and slow. Okay. Now we're going to use my wooden rib. This is another way that people pull. And I usually use this for if I mess it up and I need to fix it. I will do a push-up, bring it back under control, and then I will use a wooden rib to straighten it up. So keep in mind, the angle that you hold it, whatever angle you hold it, is where the clay is going to go. So I want to keep it going straight and tilt it in slightly. This scrapes the surface, dries the surface, and straightens my piece up. I want to have a nice dry surface because it's easier to lift off later. If you really like throw lines, you can then put them back in, but I recommend ribbing the outside of your piece with your wooden rib for cylindrical pieces so that it's nice and dry. Okay, notice the width of it. My hand just fits in there. If you have little skinny hands, I'm jealous, and you can make skinnier cylinders, but keep that in mind when you're making. You should just barely be able to fit your hand on the inside. Okay. Now, last step, when I get my water out of the inside, you got to do this on everything. Everything you make, get the water out of the inside. If you leave water in there, it's a surefire way to get your pieces to crack. Okay, then I'm going to use the corner of my wooden rib to give myself an undercut. This gives me a shadow at the bottom. It gives a place for my wire to slide, and then later when we are glazing, it will give you a change in direction, which makes it easier for you to wax your pieces. And the very last thing is you're going to pass your wire into the bottom. Now, when you're lifting your pieces off, dry hands. Dry hands, dry surface. 1, 2, 3, twist and lift, and then place it. That's how you lift your pieces off. If you hesitate, pass your wire under there again. It will definitely re-stick to itself. Okay, so let's stick this guy on here and see how I did. Cut it in half. Decent. Whoopsie, that one's fallen. This guy. That's what you want. Nice flat bottom, right angle at the base, thin walls. Okay. That's a cylinder. Wedge your clay up, and then make another one. And then keep practicing.